The pursuit of photorealism in modern gaming has produced some technically impressive work and some of the most soulless experiences in the medium's history. These 10 games made a different choice. They built worlds with pixel art, hand-painted sprites, and carefully crafted visuals that no texture budget can replicate. If you've been underwhelmed by the latest open-world showcase, this list is for you. The fourth game in the Momodora series is also its best, and it earns that title the hard way, by being exceptional at almost everything it attempts. The devs built a Metroidvania with the soul of classic Castlevania, set in a cursed kingdom on the edge of extinction, and the result is one of the most beautifully animated, tightly tuned action platformers in the genre. What strikes you first is the art. The 16-bit sprite work here is among the finest I've seen. Characters move with a fluidity that makes most modern games look stiff by comparison, and the color palette does something unusual for a dark fantasy game. It's muted but warm, lending an atmosphere of melancholy rather than grimness. The cursed kingdom of Karst feels like a place that was once alive, now slowly going quiet. That tone is consistent throughout and carries more emotional weight than the game's sparse dialogue needs to. Combat is the real draw. You play as Keiho, a priestess who fights with a giant maple leaf, which sounds absurd and feels exactly right in practice. The dodge-based, rhythm-like quality of each encounter rewards learning and patience. Boss fights in particular are highlights, each one a precise dance of reading patterns and finding openings, the kind of encounter where you feel genuinely outmatched until you're suddenly not. The game is short, around 5 to 7 hours, and light on exploration upgrades compared to other Metroidvanias, which is a fair criticism. The honest limit here is scope. Momodora is compact by design, and players expecting a sprawling world will find it ends before they've had enough of it. But for what it sets out to do, atmosphere, movement, and combat that feels handcrafted, it's a remarkably complete experience. Battle Chasers Night War exists because one of the most influential comic artists of the late 90s wanted to make the JRPG his comic series always felt like. After leaving and returning to both comics and game development across 2 decades, he finally built it with Airship Syndicate. The result draws from Final Fantasy, Suikoden, and Diablo, filtered through a Western comic aesthetic that produces something genuinely unlike anything else in the genre. The art is Night War's signature. Oversized weapons, expressive characters, a color palette that sits between manga and oil painting, translates beautifully to combat backgrounds, character designs, and burst ability animations, making battles consistently worth watching. 6 playable characters are well differentiated both visually and mechanically, each capable of filling multiple roles, which means building a 3-person party is genuine experimentation rather than a solved equation. Combat is where the game earns its place on this list. Turn order is visible in advance. Basic attacks generate overcharge, temporary MP that disappears after battle, rewarding aggressive ability use over resource hoarding. Burst meters fuel limit break style moves. Procedurally assembled dungeons can be run at increasing difficulty tiers for better rewards. The whole loop is tight and satisfying in the way classic JRPGs are when they're working. The honest weakness is the story. The writing never rises to the level of the game's visual ambition, and character development is thinner than the cast deserves. But for players who miss JRPG design that prioritize battle depth and dungeon exploration over cinematic storytelling, Battle Chasers is one of the most competent executions of that formula in years. Chasm spent over 6 years in development, and what came out of that time is a Metroidvania RPG that draws heavily from Symphony of the Night and wears its inspiration without apology. The hook is a procedurally generated map. Each playthrough assembles handcrafted rooms into a unique layout, meaning no 2 players' dungeon is quite the same. In practice, it's a more subtle effect than it sounds, but it gives the game genuine replayability and a slightly different texture to each run. The pixel art is exceptional. Developer BitKid built a 16-bit aesthetic with the kind of detail and animation quality that makes the visual comparison to classic Castlevania feel earned rather than flattering. Environments are richly layered and distinct across 6 themed areas. The enemy variety is genuinely impressive. The bestiary runs to over 90 creatures, and the animation of both characters and monsters has a fluidity that keeps the visual side consistently satisfying through the whole campaign. Combat draws on the deep well of the Igavania subgenre. A wide range of weapons, swords, whips, spears, maces, each with their own feel and attack range, layered over a leveling system that builds out health and magic stats. It's familiar in the best sense. Where Chasm earns criticism is in the procedural generation itself. Some critics found that randomly assembled maps produce stretches that feel directionless compared to a fully handcrafted dungeon design. The story is also thin, functional setup, not much follow-through. But if what you're looking for is a classically inspired Metroidvania RPG with excellent visual craft and generous depth, Chasm delivers that with confidence and care. Iconoclasts is the work of one person who spent 7 years building it alone. That context matters because what he produced is not the rough-edged passion project you might expect from a solo dev. It's a polished, confident, visually stunning Metroidvania with a story that tackles religious authority, environmentalism, and moral ambiguity in ways most studio games wouldn't dare to attempt. You play as Robin, an unlicensed mechanic in a world controlled by a theocratic organization called One Concern. The setup sounds simple enough. Girl with a wrench rebels against oppressive regime, but Iconoclast refuses to stay simple. The characters develop in ways that are genuinely surprising. The antagonists are written with real complexity, and the stakes build into something I didn't expect to feel the weight of. A few reviewers found the story sequences interruptive, and I understand that. The game has a lot to say and sometimes stops the action to say it. I found the payoff worth it. The gameplay itself is excellent. Combat is precise and adaptable. Puzzles are well constructed and satisfying, and the boss fights are consistently impressive. Each one mechanically distinct, each one a spectacle. The sprite work is vibrant and meticulous, bringing the game's bright but dangerous world to life with a level of detail that makes it feel expensive in the best sense. The tweak system, which is a light crafting mechanic for passive upgrades, is the one element that never quite earns its space. But that's a minor complaint against a major achievement. Iconoclast is one of those games that reminds you what a single person with enough talent and time can actually build. D-Pad Studio started development on Owlboy in 2007. It released in 2016. 9 years is a long time, and you can feel every year of it in the finished game. Not as bloat or indecision, but as obsessive refinement. The result is one of the most technically accomplished pixel art games ever made. Characters move with a weight and expressiveness that goes beyond technical precision into something approaching animation as performance. Every frame of the sprite work communicates personality. The premise is deceptively simple. Otis is a young owlboy who can't fight, can't do much of anything on his own, but can fly and carry. His power comes from his companions, who he literally picks up and holds during combat, each friend bringing their own weapon and ability set, swapping between them in real time. Using their different capabilities across combat and puzzle scenarios gives the game a mechanical meat that keeps it interesting across its 8 to 10 hour runtime. The boss encounters are particular highlights, creative, demanding, and memorable in the way only the best 2D encounters can be. It's elevated beyond its mechanics by the story. This is a coming-of-age adventure with genuine emotional range, quiet warmth, sudden darkness, and a cast with enough depth to make the journey feel earned. The characters are wordlessly expressive in a way that's remarkable for a medium that often relies on text to carry emotion. Sky pirates, ancient ruins, a forgotten civilization. It all coheres into something larger than the sum of its dungeons. The honest criticism is that the gameplay between its best moments can be straightforward. Movement and combat rarely rise above competent outside the boss encounters. But Owlboy doesn't need every moment to be exceptional, because what it gets right, it gets very right. Most games that blend platformer and tower defense end up doing both things adequately, and neither thing brilliantly. Age's Defenders finds a third path. It builds the two genres into a structure where each depends on the other, getting more interesting as it goes. Set after a war between humanity and ancient machine gods, it follows Clue and her grandfather Bart as scavengers who stumble into something much larger than a salvage run. The loop is consistent. A platforming section where you solve puzzles using each character's distinct abilities, followed by a tower defense section where resources gathered become your defenses. The fusion build system lets you combine construct from both characters into hybrids neither could build alone. A bomb layered with a turret. A spike trap fused with a slowdown field. Figuring out what works against which enemy types is the game's most rewarding strategic puzzle, and it opens up satisfyingly across the campaign. The pixel art is hand-painted and vibrant. Environments feel alive with background movement and detail, and the soundtrack shifts between playful and atmospheric in ways that genuinely support the tone. Camp scenes between missions earn their quieter moments. The honest caveat is that this was designed for co-op, and solo play demands constant character switching that never quite becomes second nature. Some players will find the cognitive load genuinely frustrating before it clicks. But for those willing to work through it, Age's Defenders pays that investment off.
What is it?
Unavowed opens with your character being exorcised on a rooftop. You've spent the last year possessed by a demon, and the damage is done. Your life is in pieces, your past is a year of gaps and violence. And the only people willing to take you in are the Unavowed, an ancient society of paranormal investigators operating out of New York. What follows is one of the best-written point-and-click adventures of the past decade, built with a generosity of design that the genre rarely manages. They folded BioWare-style RPG structure into a classic point-and-click framework, companion characters, meaningful backstory choices, non-linear mission structure across New York's boroughs. Before you start, you choose a background: bartender, actor, or police officer. That choice isn't cosmetic. Each background shapes what's available to you across the whole game, which NPCs you have history with, which conversations open up. I played through twice and found meaningfully different experiences. The art is, again, exceptional, running at double the resolution of their previous titles. The backgrounds are atmospheric and dense with detail. The supernatural creatures are designed with genuine imagination, and the whole thing has a gritty but grounded urban fantasy feel that I associate with quality late-night TV. The jazz score and full voice acting complete the sense of a world that's been thought about carefully. The biggest limitation is difficulty. Unavowed is story-driven. Puzzles serve the narrative rather than challenge the player, and if you need friction to stay engaged, it won't provide much. But on its own terms, as a written, acted, and designed piece of interactive storytelling, it's among the best the genre has produced.
I will lend him the rest.
Beyond Galaxyland is the work of one developer, and that fact becomes more remarkable the longer you spend with it. This is a 2.5D sci-fi RPG that blends the visual energy of an 80s paperback cover with the mechanical warmth of classic JRPGs, set across a galaxy full of alien worlds that each feel like they were designed by someone who genuinely loves science fiction. The story follows Doug, a suburban teenager yanked through a portal to a place called Galaxyland, a preserved solar system controlled by a corporation called Dreamcore, with Earth apparently destroyed behind him and only his guinea pig for company. What starts as a fish-out-of-water adventure builds into something with real emotional stakes, and the writing is sharp enough that the characters actually land. I was not expecting to care about a rocket launcher-wielding guinea pig, and yet. The turn-based combat takes clear inspiration from Chrono Trigger and the Mario RPGs. blending time defense mechanics with an active ability system, monster capturing, and elemental weaknesses. It's not groundbreaking, but it's well constructed and moves at a pace that respects your time, rarely letting any single encounter outstay its welcome. The pixel art is vibrant and varied across the game's different planetary biomes, and the electronic soundtrack is one of the better scores in recent indie RPG memory. The main caveat is that combat difficulty stays low throughout the main campaign, and the story leaves several threads hanging in a way that reads as setup for a sequel that may or may not arrive. But as a pure package, warmth, personality, and a solo dev hitting well above his weight class, Beyond Galaxyland is a genuine joy. Horizon's Gate is the third game from solo developer Rad Codex, built on the same engine and world as their earlier tactical RPGs, Voidspire Tactics and Alvora Tactics. It's a seafaring open-world RPG where you sail the world of Ural as an explorer, trader, or privateer, and the combination of Final Fantasy Tactics-style turn-based combat with a naval adventure framework is exactly as satisfying as that description suggests. The class system is the mechanical centerpiece. Starting characters begin with a generic sailor class and unlock new ones through experience and trainers scattered across the world's ports. There are over 34 classes to progress through, each with their own abilities and passive skills, and two can be equipped simultaneously, meaning the hybrid builds available quickly become staggering in their variety. I found myself genuinely thinking through loadouts between sessions, which is exactly the engagement loop a game like this needs. The world rewards curiosity. Clicking any object in the environment logs it in your journal, which can be sold to researchers. Mapping the coastline earns cartographer fees. Privateering yields cargo and ships. Almost any activity turns into progress. And the open structure means you can pursue the narrative or ignore it entirely for hours without the game ever feeling like it's waiting for you. The fair criticism is that the story is thin, a revenge plot that sets you loose and doesn't demand much attention. Naval combat, while enjoyable, is also simpler than the land-based tactical system and can feel like a lesser version of the same idea. But Rock Paper Shotgun gave it a bestest best recommendation, and I think that's right. For the price, the depth here is extraordinary. Walk into the world of Blasphemous for the first time, and the first thing that hits you is the art. Developer The Game Kitchen, based in Sevilla, built a pixel art world drawn from Spanish religious iconography. Francisco Goya paintings, Catholic imagery, the architectural weight of Gothic cathedrals, and turned into something genuinely like nothing else in the medium. Custodia is beautiful and horrifying in the same breath, and every enemy, every environment, every execution animation is designed with a consistency of vision that takes real conviction. You are the penitent one, the sole survivor of a slaughtered religious order, on a pilgrimage through a land corrupted by something called the miracle, a divine force that twists the faithful into monsters of their own devotion. The lore is dense, told through item descriptions and brief NPC encounters in the style of Dark Souls, and the deeper you dig into it, the more unsettling and coherent it becomes. I found myself genuinely invested in piecing together what this world was and how it broke. The combat is precise and weighty. Timed parries, brutal execution finishers, a fervor meter that builds into prayer-based special attacks. It's not the deepest hack-and-slash system in the genre, and the lack of significant mobility upgrades means the combat loop can start to feel repetitive in the later areas. The platforming sections also have a reputation for frustration, particularly around instant death spikes, and that reputation is earned. But when Blasphemous is working, when the music swells, when you crack a boss pattern open, when the environmental storytelling lands, it's genuinely unique. Very few games look this specific, feel this deliberately constructed, or carry this kind of cultural weight in every pixel.